Welcome to the People Relations Podcast, the podcast series brought to you by People Relations HR Consulting, where we talk with business and HR leaders around the globe. In each episode, we will discuss exclusive insights, strategies, and advice to help you make better people decisions in your business. For show notes and incredible bonus resources, simply visit www.peoplerelations.com.au. Okay, let's get started. Hello, welcome back to the show. Great to have you along. I'm really looking forward to our conversation with Megan Farrell, who is the Chief People Officer at Grow Inc. Before, she has held HR leadership roles at Aware Super, Woolworth Limited, Rail Corp, and even Coca-Cola. Megan has over 20 years of experience in human resources across many industries, including financial services, technology, FMCG, transport, travel, and tourism, both in the private and public sectors. First, Megan, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. You have a very fascinating HR career, working for actually fascinating brands. So it's an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Are you able to please tell us about your professional experience until now in working with these very well-known brands? You're based in Sydney, correct?
That's right. Yes, I'm based in Sydney. Yes, it's been an interesting adventure professionally. I remember a number of years ago, a senior search agency said to me, "Oh, someone would have to take a risk to employ you because I've been across all these different industries." But when I work backwards and I think about how it all began, school wasn't really for me. I didn't like that sort of structured learning environment. And I remember my parents said to me, "If you get a job, you can leave school." So what happened? I got a job.
Wow.
And it was a very low-level job. Obviously, I had no skills. I was 17, so I was working in a bank. And within a few months, I was really bored. And I remember at the time looking at this travel agency that was just across the road. And I used to watch the people working there. And every day I started going in and getting brochures. And in the end, I started every afternoon going in and sitting in the office and just watching what they were doing. Cut a long story short, they eventually offered me a job. I guess they figured that if I was going to sit there, they may as well pay me to do something.
Get you productive with all that observation, learning so much.
Exactly. So by that stage, I had read every brochure they had. I had researched and everything. And anyway, I had a very long and enjoyable career in the travel industry. As a single younger person, it was a great place to be. Lots of travel, lots of opportunities. And one of the things that happened after that is that I started looking at tour guiding and teaching, and I ended up in a private college teaching how to be a travel consultant, teaching how to work in an airline, teaching how to be a tour guide, and then at TAFE. So my teaching morphed into what we now know as learning and development. And that was my first HR role. My first HR role was a learning and development consultant with Rail Corp. And I remember taking a 3-month contract with them, and it ended up being 7 years, because once you're in that space with the restructures and the opportunities, you just end up staying.
Yeah.
So my 7 years at Railcorp was fantastic. I learned so much. I had so many different roles, learned how to lead teams and how to develop people, and it was wonderful. And when the time came to move on, it was again a choice. I could have had an amazing career in government, because you can do that. But I thought, no, I need to go to a big ASX listed company. And that's when I selected Woolworths. And at that stage with Woolworths, I was looking for a leader that was inspiring. I was looking for a leader that could challenge me to be a better professional. And I met a lady called Cheryl Ray, who was at Woolworths at the time, and she was amazing. So again, 3 or 4 years at Woolworths, and that was great. We set up the change management practice there, and I had a group role. So I partnered with supermarkets, liquor, petrol, masters back then as well. So it was an amazing experience. And again, when my time came to move on from Woolworths, I'm like, oh, what do I want to do now? And I had the opportunity to go and be a chief people officer with a technology startup. So I'm like, wow, that's different, because I never thought I'd want to be a generalist, because my specialty was M&A, leadership, change management. It was the strategic part of HR. I never thought that doing policies, procedures, talent management, recruitment, or onboarding would be my sort of of interest for me. I learned obviously so much and built the function from scratch. There was a little bit of an HR presence when I arrived, but they really only did payroll and bonuses. So built the function. So all the policies and procedures globally, onboarding, recruitment, succession planning, talent management, performance, all of it. Leadership program, women's program, diversity, inclusion, and that was incredible. And then I went to Aware Super, and that was a maternity cover. I thought, I'd give contracting a go, see what it's like to go back and be a contractor. And I loved it at Aware Super. The people there are amazing. I had a great opportunity. And one of the things I did at the end was the investments team globally invested, but were a locally based team. So I got to plan the strategy for the team to be global. And I loved it. And I was really hoping the lady that was on maternity leave wouldn't come back. And it was her first child. And I was saying to her, oh, it's really good to have your children close together.
Yes, you have to enjoy this precious time.
Yeah.
But
so then she came back. She ignored what I was suggesting. And then I moved on to Grow Inc. And Grow again has been an amazing experience, a technology company in financial services and a startup. We've just done a $50 million raise. So now we're in a scale up mode. And again, building everything from scratch and really making the people function a very succinct and humming, robust function to support the business.
Well, Megan, before I move on to any questions, I want to say that I'm absolutely impressed with your career. And it's great as well how you've been open to moving to different industries. Every industry has its nuances, its challenges, but I think a lot of innovation can happen when we come from another industry to a totally new industry. And I really love as well the different type of businesses you were exposed to, apart from very well-known brands. In companies being in different stages. So for those listeners that are outside of Australia that may have not heard about Grow Inc., what exactly does Grow Inc. do and who do you help?
So Grow Inc. is a technology company primarily, and they provide the administration for superannuation funds. So superannuation funds administration is generally outsourced, and generally the old school thinking was to be outsourced to the Philippines or an offshore team. But Grow Inc. has built this technology that enables a much better member experience and a cost-effective outcome for the superannuation fund. It's leading edge. It really is shaking up the market, and they've got an amazing trajectory ahead, a wonderful team, a wonderful CEO and leadership team, and definitely a massive opportunity.
How many employees do they have?
So now it's about
under 200.
So yeah, and for those people, when you think about Grow Inc., it's a new player in the market. Interestingly, there's not that many competitors at the moment because Grow Inc. relies on technology, whereby the competitors generally rely on people doing the work. So it's really changing the model. It's like what's happening to a lot of industries, really, where the reliance on technology has increased so much more.
Yes, absolutely, especially in the last decade.
Yes.
And Megan, as a business leader specializing in people, what have been your biggest learnings over the last few years?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? No one knew that COVID was coming. No one knew that we would be locked down, particularly in certain parts of the world and in Victoria for that long. I think there's two avenues of learning. One is from a people leadership perspective, and then one is from a business leadership perspective. And I think from a business leadership perspective, there is a really big emphasis on understanding the business strategy and understanding where the organization's going. It doesn't matter what organization it is, but understanding where it's going and understanding what are the bodies of work required to deliver that strategy, and obviously the timeframes. Because then, as a people leader, you can do all your planning of your initiatives, like what initiatives do you need, when do you need them, and who do you need them for, to really enable that strategy. So my focus is always on understanding the strategy first, understanding the trajectory of the business, what are the commercial outcomes we're trying to achieve, what are the risks and how do we mitigate that, and then working backwards into the people. And I think the emphasis over the last few years, as we got out of COVID and lockdown and now we continue on, is really about leading those hybrid teams. And how do you enable those teams to be continually productive? And if I take one step further backwards, to do that, for me, it's all about leadership. And even though there's all sorts of research over many years where people have said leadership is the big thing, leaders need to do X, Y, Z, we've got to develop our leaders. I think the emphasis is now even a little bit more stringent, that there is an impetus on leaders to really be able to engage either remote or hybrid teams. So that means there's potentially a higher skill level required of leaders and some additional pressure.
Absolutely. I think that added more complexity post-COVID world. In terms of hybrid, what are your recommendations in how to go about deciding how that's going to look like and then probably executing and communicating that to the people?
Yeah, I think there's certain industries and certain professions and roles that it's not possible to be remote or hybrid. So if we separate that, for people who work in the office or do work that is able to be done hybridly, I do find it curious that there is a lot of media coverage at the moment in Australia with regard to organisations saying you've had to come back to the office, whereby a lot of organisations prior to COVID were global anyway. So you didn't meet your peers because the organisation couldn't afford to bring everyone together on a regular basis. So there was many organisations that already worked via Zoom or Teams or whatever, webinars, etc., for communication and for running their business. So I do find it a little bit curious that there is this big push here at the moment and a lot of media coverage about, oh, you've got to go back and 3 days a week or whatever it is. So my recommendation with regard to hybrid is that, one, it's got to be role appropriate and business appropriate. But secondly, you want people to come to the office for a reason, not necessarily to do their job, right? One of the big pressures that also I've recognised in the last few years is about how to attract talent. And definitely if you're saying to your high-performing individuals, hey, the new lifestyle you've got set up through COVID, your caring arrangements, your hobbies, your whatever your routine is, your activities, you now need to change them. They're going to look for another job or they're going to be disengaged. And you don't want to do that in this market, right? You want to keep your workforce as stable as possible and mitigate your attrition costs. So I think coming to the office for a reason, and at Grow, and also a little bit at Aware, one of the things I implemented was what we called power surges. And power surges were a reason to come together because you were going to be either more productive or more engaged. So it could be anything from a strategy planning day, a workshop, a new team member, doing a social event because it's a company milestone. So any activity or event where coming together physically enabled engagement and productivity, that was how we built our cadence. So I partnered with leaders and said, okay, in your function and in your team, what works for you? What cadence have you got? There was scrum teams, there was squads, there was product increment planning, there's sales cycles. What's your cycle? When's a good time for you to bring your team together? Is it weekly? Is it fortnightly? Is it 3 times a week? Is it once a week? And so from there, we built this cadence for each team and then aligned it to the organization. So obviously,
very smart.
Yeah. And that meant that for roles where there is the deep thinking, where there is the planning, where you need the quiet time, that was built into the role. So in the case of hybrid teams, my recommendation where possible is have a look at the cadence, the working cadence. What is it that you're trying to deliver and by when? And build your hybrid work around that. When you're in a global environment, you've got time zones to consider as well. So in Australia, you don't want your people either early morning in the office or late at night in the office. You want them to be engaged, productive, focus. So probably that's a good time for them to be at home if they're doing those global hours, and vice versa when you're in Europe or, in Asia as well. But you can certainly find a middle ground where there is time, the right time for people to come together. And depending on the organization, you might fly in the Australians or the Asians or the Europeans. You might bring those people together, or senior leaders of those groups. But power surges, whatever you want to call them, everybody can create their own titling based on their organization culture, I think is a really solid way to start to build that cadence. And also it helps you with your messaging. The whole thing about you need to come back for 3 days, the question of why, because the company says so, that's not going to get you an engaged workforce. When you look at how to mitigate productivity risk, having a good messaging is solid. So the power surges have really worked in the organizations I've led recently.
I think it's good as well to consult with your people, ensure you have a fair process that works for everyone. So I think hybrid is fantastic. It's just a matter of what's the approach when wanting to implement that. And also something very important that you mentioned is providing training and support to managers and leaders to effectively manage a hybrid team.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So from a people perspective, and as a chief people officer, what do you see are the biggest challenges for businesses today, and what recommendations you have for business owners and leaders to action and address them?
Yeah, I think as we look forward, there's a few key areas that I think still remain our focus, and it would be valuable for us to keep that as priorities. The first, maybe not in this order because it depends on the business, but certainly what you mentioned, developing our leaders. Our leaders are responsible for the employee life cycle and the employee experience, and you want it to be awesome, right? It's a challenging environment financially. The world has shifted, things are different. So you want that employee experience to be awesome for everybody. And that's delivered through the leaders. So as an organization and a people leader, investing in those leaders, whatever that is, whether it's a lot of money, a little bit of money, but just bite-sized incremental development, I think that's still key. And then obviously that helps with leading hybrid teams as well, because you're supporting them with that. The second thing is, as an HR professional, really, again, keeping connected to the strategy. As the business changes and morphs, and that you might be opening or closing in new markets, winning, losing clients on a particular sales trajectory or not, just being across that, because that really defines what initiatives you can deliver and when. You know, what's the investment that you need to make and by when and for which part of the audience, because not everybody needs the same thing. So I think that's really important. And when you're doing that, it also enables you to help with communicating from the top of the strategy and the executive team or the senior leadership team all the way down to, you know, all of the newcomers and the entry-level roles. The research tells us that purpose and connectedness is really important now, much more than what it used to be. So once you cross the strategy and understanding the big programs of work, you can support the communications of that through individual leaders, through the CEO, the MD, or whoever it might be in your internal comms. The other thing I think that's really important is keeping your organizational design aligned to your strategy. A lot of organizations have had to downsize, have had to increase numbers in certain areas, decrease numbers in other areas, decrease numbers across the board. So making sure that your organizational design horizontally and vertically is aligned to deliver that strategy and those commercial outcomes. And part of that is then informing your talent management. You know, what skills do you need? What capabilities are you looking for? What's the standard and skill set and seniority you need to hire for? So really keeping that in the forefront of your mind and just reviewing it on a really regular basis, as often as you review the strategy, as often as you review KPIs. And then the final thing I think would be really making sure that your remuneration data is current and relevant to your market and relevant to the size of your organization. Again, the employee experience is deemed to be a top priority. Connectedness and purpose is deemed to be a top priority. And then the final one at the moment, definitely in Australia, is remuneration. A lot of pressure here in the UK with interest rate rises and cost of living. So we need to be aware and have a current remuneration, not only process, but definitely market data. And I think if you can prioritize those 4 areas as a business leader, it's a really good start to being able to engage people and attract great talent. I think the only sort of general comment I would make is that for most organizations, the world has shifted significantly, right, due to the external markets. And not everyone has a budget for people initiatives, or there's focus in different areas, or there's funding in different areas. What I found to be a good survival technique is to really understand your organization and understand what opportunities you can afford your people, your team members, within that organization, because each organization is unique and there's things that you can do that potentially don't cost a lot of money, but do require a little bit of time and organizing and structure. Everywhere I've been, we've never had an amazingly unlimited budget. It's always been capped, particularly at different times of the year based on sales cycles. So, there's always been a trade-off, and what I've tried to do is be creative. So, use my network for women's speakers on International Women's Day, or in a global environment, do a secondment so someone can go and work in the same team or the same function in another part of the world. So really drawing on things that are internally available. And I think that helps inspire. It helps with the leaders to offer their people something, and it helps to keep your people engaged.
Absolutely. That's an incredible, valuable perspective, making the most of internal resources and finding innovative approaches. So, Megan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you share your rich experiences, advice, and practical tips with us. Thank you for joining us today. I wish you a wonderful day ahead, and we look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the People Relations Podcast. We hope that today's discussion helps you find new ways to make better people decisions within your business. For additional insights and resources, remember to visit our website at peoplerelations.com.au. If you found value in this episode, please like and share the show with your friends who are dedicated to running and growing their businesses. We can't wait to have you back next time for more great conversations. Until then, take care and see you soon.